3 bone-chilling true road trip horror tales that haunt you forever. The night was thick with silence, the kind that swallows every sound, leaving only the occasional rustle of leaves. It was then that the first bone-chilling tale unfolded. Julie and Mark were driving through the vast emptiness of Route 66, their laughter fading into the dusk like the last light of day. Suddenly, their headlights caught something strange on the side of the road, a figure, eerily still. A man, his clothes tattered and smeared with dirt, stood there, staring straight ahead as if he was waiting for something, or someone. As they rolled closer, a sense of danger crackled in the air. The moon overhead illuminated his face, twisted in anguish, mouth open as if he had been screaming for help. But no sound came from his lips. Just silence and a heavy tension that snaked through the car. They exchanged glances. "Do we stop?" Mark asked, his voice trembling. A tight knot formed in Julie's stomach. "I don't think we should." The man suddenly turned his head, his eyes wide and reflective like mirrors showing the remnants of lost souls trapped in his gaze. With a jolt, they sped past, leaving the towering figure behind, but not the chill in their hearts. Every dark shadow along the road stretched and twisted, morphing into sinister shapes lurking in their rearview mirror. Tires hummed against the asphalt, but it was as if the whisper of the wind carried the man's silent scream, echoing in their ears. Then, out of nowhere, a thump echoed on the roof of their car. Mark's heart raced, white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, his breath quickening. Julie turned and saw nothing there, but the feeling of eyes watching them clung to her like a heavy blanket. "Did you hear that?" she gasped, pulse pounding, suffocating the air between them. Mark nodded, dread swirling. They both felt it, the presence of something beyond comprehension. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The night dragged on, each mile feeling longer than the last. Mark's anxious glances at the sky, the stars all seemed to be blinking codes, and when they finally pulled into a small gas station, the fluorescent lights buzzed, flickering ominously. "We need to get out of this car," Julie insisted, but as soon as they exited, the sense of unease turned palpable, thick, like a fog wrapping around them. The attendant behind the counter eyed them warily, and Julie's heart sank as she realized the man behind the glass was the same twisted face they had seen on the highway. Her breath caught. He should have been miles away. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, the words dripping with a mix of warning and muffled terror. What happened next would leave them haunted forever, as they stood frozen in disbelief, the shadows creeping in closer, engulfing them in an unseen horror. The road would never welcome them back the same way again. What dark secrets does this road hold? A palpable silence hung in the gas station, wrapping around Mark and Julie like a vice. Time seemed to halt. The fluorescent lights flickered more violently, illuminating the attendant's face grotesquely in flashes. His eyes, wild and unblinking, bore into them, begging for them to understand the looming threat. "Get out of here," he repeated, each word a flicker of urgency that cut through the tension. The chill in the air rose, creeping down their spines. Julie, heart pounding, grabbed Mark's arm. "We should go now." But Mark was rooted to the spot, fixed on the attendant's face. "What do you mean?" His voice trembled, but there was a defiance bubbling within him. "We can't just leave without knowing what's going on." The attendant leaned closer to the glass, sweat dripping from his brow. "You don't know what you've seen. That road isn't safe. Something is out there, and it wants you." A freezing gust of wind whipped through the gas station, rustling faded magazines and sending a shiver through Julie's bones. The flickering lights above cast strange shadows that danced along the walls, as if the very building was alive and terrified. Mark squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, as if shutting out the horror. But when he opened them again, something moved at the edge of the station in the darkness beyond the glass door. A slithering shadow, just out of reach of the flickering lights, glided closer. "Did you see that?" Julie's voice was barely a whisper, fear infectious. "Just stay behind me," Mark said, shielding her instinctively as they stepped back, eyes locked on that looming darkness. The attendant's expression shifted to one of panic. "It's coming, run." He shoved open the door, the bell above ringing eerily. Mark and Julie bolted outside, adrenaline surging through them. Cold night air filled their lungs, yet they were met with a cacophony of silence the world had stilled. Their hearts hammered in their chests as they stumbled back to their car, the shadows wrapping around them like tendrils, closing in. With shaking hands, Mark fumbled for the keys, eyes darting around. The car's headlights flickered to life, cutting through the darkness. "Get in. Quick." Once inside, they locked the doors, panting heavily. But as Mark turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtered and coughed. Come on. Don't do this now." Panic set in as he twisted the key again, desperate to hear the roar of the engine. Just as the engine finally sprang to life, the night erupted in terror. A loud thud thumped against the trunk, rattling the vehicle. Their eyes widened in horror. Something was on the roof. "What is happening?" Julie screamed, peering through the back window, but the night was only black. Something glistened, a pale hand, gripping onto the metal like a vice. "Drive, Mark. Drive." The car lurched forward, tires screeching as Mark floored the gas pedal, racing past the gas station. But even as they sped away, an overwhelming sense of dread settled heavily in the air. "What did you see back there?" Julie finally broke the silence, breathless and wild-eyed. "Is that man still following us?" Mark's face paled. "I don't think we're alone." Just as he spoke, the radio crackled to life, the static morphing into desperate cries that clawed at their sanity. Voices weeping, pleading for release, as the headlights revealed a figure emerging from the side of the road, pale and twisted. Time dissolved, hearts raced. The terror was palpable, thundering in their ears. And then the radio burst forth with a chilling message, "Help us." Julie clutched Mark's arm tighter as they sped into the night, unaware of the horrors that awaited just beyond the shadows. What had they awakened? What chased them into darkness? Would they ever escape the curses of the road? The car careened down the dark highway, the cutting wind howling through the open windows as they escaped the gas station. Yet the thrill of speed offered little comfort. Mark kept glancing nervously at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those pale fingers reaching for them again. "Are we safe?" Julie's voice cracked, laced with panic. "What was that?" "I don't know," Mark said, his heart racing as the blackness of the road swallowed them whole. The headlights flickered, unable to pierce the thick curtain of night ahead. Shadows twisted along the edge of the road, each dip and rise creating a ghostly illusion. He felt her pressing against the passenger seat, her breath quickening, matching the mounting dread in his chest. It's just shadows," he lied, trying to sound confident. The thought of whatever was lurking out there, following them, was unbearable. Then, the radio crackled again, slicing through their fear with shrill whispers. It was no longer just static, it vibrated with desperation, each word like ice against their skin. "Turn back, we need you, help us shut it off." Julie shouted, her fists trembling in her lap. Mark fumbled for the knob, and when he silenced the cursed voices, a palpable relief washed over them. But the silence was more haunting than the whispers. "What do we do now?" she asked, her eyes darting to every corner. "We can't stay on this road." "I just need to find a place to pull over," Mark replied, gripping the wheel tighter, the leather warm against his clammy palms. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught his eye. A distant glow shimmered through the trees lining the road, flickering like a beacon. "Look!" There's something up ahead, he pointed, hope igniting in his chest, but beneath it, a pulsing dread. They sped closer to the light, revealing a weather-beaten welcome sign for a town named Hollow Creek. A sense of urgency pushed him onward. Yet as they approached, unease filled the air. The glow illuminated an eerie quiet, the streets were empty, the windows dark. The weight of dread settled once more. "This doesn't feel right," Julie whispered, her voice low, a reminder of the fears gnawing at their sanity. As he drove deeper into Hollow Creek, crumbling buildings lined the streets, a prison of silence in a town that seemed frozen in time. Mark parked near a shell of a once bustling diner. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, flickering, casting an otherworldly light. "Should we go in?" Mark asked, glancing at Julie, whose face was pale, eyes wide with concern. "What if there's no one left?" She replied, shivering. From behind them, a sudden noise jolted them both upright, a scuttling sound mixed with a low, almost human-like moan. The darkness around them felt alive, filled with invisible eyes tracking their every move. "Did you hear that?" She gasped, her hand tightening around the door handle. Mark's heart raced, fear paralyzed him, his instincts screaming for him to flee. Before he could respond, the diner door creaked open, revealing a shadowy figure silhouetted against the pale light, its attributes obscured. "Help us," it croaked, voice as thin as the air around them. The air froze. Mark's eyes widened in terror, and he realized they had not escaped their pursuer. They had only led it to a new battlefield. "Run!" Julie screamed, her fear igniting his primal instinct. They flung open the car doors, just as a hand reached out from the darkness. Mark sprinted back toward the road, pulling Julie with him, every instinct yelling for them to escape before whatever hunted them could strike. But as they crossed onto the deserted street, a crushing realization hit him. The light from the diner blazed brighter, and figures emerged from the shadows surrounding them. Eyes, flickering with hunger, mirrored their own fear. Trapped between the horrors of a town interrupted and something far worse lurking behind, they realized the nightmare was only just beginning. Where did this road truly lead? What awaited them in that diner? Would they surrender to the shadows, or could they fight back? Mark's legs burned as they ran, adrenaline surging through him like fire. The darkness loomed heavy around them, a thick blanket that smothered whatever light the diner and its ghostly figures offered. "Keep going. Don't look back," he shouted, though dread prickled his skin at the thought of what was behind him. Julie was right beside him, her breath labored, desperation pushing her. They raced down the road, glancing over their shoulders just in time to see silhouettes moving. There were at least 4 of them now, shadows melding into one another, inching closer at a pace that felt disturbingly calculated. "Where are we supposed to go?" she panted, her voice tinged with panic. "Anywhere but here," Mark shouted back. He felt something cold wash over him, the air held a sense of despair that clawed at his chest, threatening to pull him down like quicksand. They rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. The road forked into 2 trails, one leading toward the dark mass of trees, the other winding deeper into the heart of Hollow Creek. Behind them, the figures drew closer, faces obscured but eyes burning with an unnatural glow. "Mark, we can't split up." Julie's words came in a frantic whisper, but Mark knew they had no choice. "Stick with me." "To the left," he urged. They pivoted towards the woods, an instinctual, desperate flight from the murky unknown. Branches snapped underfoot as they plunged into the darkness, and the silence was punctuated by the sound of their harsh breathing. Shadows flickered in their peripheral vision, but every instinct urged them forward. "Wait!" Julie gasped, stumbling over an uneven patch of earth. Mark steadied her, but in that moment of distraction, the dreadful moaning echoed louder around them, reverberating off the trees like a curse. It wasn't just the figures, now it sounded as if the forest itself wept with longing. "Didn't we just leave a haunting voice behind?" Mark mumbled through clenched teeth, trying to ignore the creeping sense of déjà vu crawling over his skin. In the midst of their flight, an unsettling thought struck him wherever they were running. It was as if the very ground beneath them conspired against their escape. "Look! There's light!" Julie shouted, pointing ahead. They broke through the underbrush and stumbled into a small clearing. A pocket of wide-open space sat in stark contrast to the suffocating trees. Another faint glow beckoned from a dilapidated shack, its cracked windows offering a glimpse of flickering candlelight. "Mark, we need to hide," Julie urged. Heart pounding, Mark nodded and pulled her toward the shack. It was a rickety formation, but they had no time to hesitate. The shadows lingered just outside the tree line, whispering promises of a fate worse than death. They slipped inside the shack, slamming the door behind them and wedging a nearby log against it. As darkness enveloped them, the firelight cast eerie shapes on the walls. "Do you think they can't find us in here?" Mark breathed, straining to hold his own fear at bay. "I don't know," Julie replied, her voice trembling. In that moment, they both realized that the dark wasn't merely a lack of light, but a presence, oppressive and alive. Then, the whooshing of air swept through the shack, curling around them as if the wind itself was a whisper. Mark's heart dropped when he heard a voice soft, dark, and laden with intent echoing just outside. "Help us come back, shut up." Mark snapped, momentarily forgetting safety as he clenched his fists. But the more he fought against that voice, the more it clawed at his mind. "Listen," Julie hissed. "We have to figure out what is going on." But they were so caught in the moment's terror, they forgot to keep an ear out for the creeping danger beyond their door. The breath of night wrapped itself around them tighter as they realized those figures weren't the only thing watching. The shadows seemed to pulse, a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, and just before the overwhelming darkness closed in, the door rattled violently. The door splintered, and he felt a deep, instinctual fear grip. What had they stumbled into? What would those figures do if they got in? Would the shack hold? As the shadows moved closer, it became clear they were more than just hunters. They were a warning. And the night was far from over. The whispers grew louder, drowning out their panic, as Mark's resolve began to waver. "Don't let them take you," he shouted, but the words felt hollow against the eager, hungry voices. What awaited them in the terrifying dark? Could hope survive a night haunted by ghosts of Hollow Creek? The door bucked again, splinters flying as the shadows pressed against it, their whispers morphing into a shrill cacophony. Mark's breath hitched. He glanced at Julie, whose eyes widened with terror, reflecting the flickering light. "Do you have anything?" he panted, searching her face for some glimmer of hope. "Anything we can use to fight back?" Julie's hands trembled as she rummaged through her backpack, and Mark could hear it, the low murmur of despair, pausing just on the other side of the weathered wood. "Just my phone," she blurted out, brandishing it like a lifeline. "But there's no signal." "Damn it!" Mark hissed, feeling the deflation of hope. The door rattled again, and they both jumped. It would burst open any second, and whatever waited outside was no mere figment of their imagination. The shadows were closing in, vibrating with an urgency that sent chills spiraling down Mark's spine. He pressed his back against the wall, the rough wood biting into his skin. The shack felt small, constrictive, the walls closing in around them. "Listen," Julie whispered, eyes darting towards the door. "What if we—" But she didn't finish, the thoughts colliding too fast for words. The thumps grew louder, almost impatient, as if whatever was out there could sense their fear. It frightened Mark how much he could feel it too, that gnawing dread sinking its teeth into him. Then, as if responding to their collective terror, the door finally yielded to the malevolent force against it. With a splintering snap, the door flew open, revealing a darkness that seemed to pulse with an unholy life of its own. Mark felt the world dim around him, nearly losing his footing. Then he saw them, a swirling mass of forms, neither entirely human nor beast. They drifted on the air, faces obscured, eyes glowing like sickly lanterns. The whispers morphed into a single word, a chant that gripped him. Return, return, Juliet. Run! Mark yelled, instinct firing through him. He sprinted for the back window, pulling Julie with him. They smashed through the cracked glass, oblivious to the cuts that opened on their arms. The forest awaited them again, but this time, it was different. The air felt alive, electrified with danger. They landed in a tumble, rolling on the damp earth, gasping for breath. Mark's heart raced. They had escaped, but for how long? The thick trees loomed like sentinels, twisting in shadows, and whispers still floated through the night. Mark could feel the breath of those figures right behind them, ready to drag them back into darkness. Where do we go? Julie whispered, her voice barely above a breath as she looked around, panic sharpening her features. Any direction but back, Mark replied, adrenaline propelling him forward. They took off again, crashing through the underbrush as their legs burned, fear fueling their flight. They stumbled ahead, the weight of the woods thickening, wrapping around them like chains. Suddenly, they broke into another clearing and saw it, a glowing shape, smooth and rounded, emerging from the night mist. Mark squinted. What is that? As they approached, the glow intensified, revealing an old well drenched in moonlight, stones slick with moss and mystery. A chill swept over him. This was no ordinary well. A deep voice issued from its depths, calm yet chilling. Come closer. Where it all began, Mark. We can't go near it. Julie grasped his arm, but something pulled at him, a magnetism that defied reason. It was the same voice, luring, taunting. His mind screamed to resist, but his legs moved closer, inch by inch, as if entranced. Mark, please stop. Julie's hand tightened around his wrist, terror blaring through her eyes. The shadows coalesced, edging around the clearing, watching. They were not gone. What if it's the key? He mumbled, the edges of his resolve blurring. And just as they hovered on the brink of that decision, the ground beneath them shifted. Mark stumbled, pulling Julie back as a tart mist erupted from the well, enveloping them both in an obscuring shroud. They gasped, deep against the taste of damp earth. What did we just step into? Julie's voice trembled, barely audible as the mist twisted around them, dark forms shifting within it. Mark felt the weight of eyes, pressing down from the shadows, not just from the forest anymore, but from the well. Mark, before he could respond, the chants rose again. They echoed through the mist, drowning out everything else. Return, return. What began as a desperate escape now felt like a descent into a trap. Was the well a portal or a tomb? As the fog thickened, swallowing them whole, Mark clutched Julie's hand tighter, their hearts pounding in sync. Just when he thought they'd succumb to whatever lay in the darkness, a heartbeat twined with theirs. What was waiting at the bottom of that well? Would they uncover the truth, or would they become part of the whispers forever? The mist curled like fingers around them, squeezing against their skin, each breath heavy with damp dread. Mark's heart thundered in his chest, a primal rhythm matched only by the whispering shadows that loomed nearby. The world faded to gray, the safe familiarity of the forest lost behind the veil of fog. What if we don't come back? Julie's voice quaked, filled with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She searched Mark's gaze for reassurance, but he felt just as lost. We will, he forced out, his own face betraying uncertainty. The pulse of the well seemed to draw them in deeper, the voice wrapping around his mind like invasive vines. Return, return. The chant built in urgency, sending chills racing down his spine, as if the very air was alive with anticipation. It was teasing, almost inviting a dark promise. Without thinking, Mark took a step closer, feeling a strange compulsion to peer into the darkness swirling at the well's opening. A glint caught his eye, catching his breath. It was a shimmer, a faint glow beneath the water's surface, swirling and beckoning. Somewhere within that abyss lay answers, or perhaps horrors unknown. Mark, don't. Julie yanked him back, her fingers digging into his arm. The moment of contact broke his trance, and he realized how precarious their situation had become. Maybe this is the way out, he proposed lightly, but guilt twisted in his gut. Or a way to fight back? Julie shook her head violently, her voice barely a whisper. What if it's a trap? We can't risk it. Before Mark could respond, the ground shifted again, accompanied by a low, guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate right through them. The well trembled, and the whispers escalated, a frenzy of voices rising in a crescendo, pulling at the edges of their sanity. Return, return! The menace in their tone sent a chill deep into his bones. The shadows, sensing their hesitation, seemed to congeal, drifting closer, their forms shifting ominously. Run! Mark shouted, yanking Julie away from the well's edge. They turned, bursting back towards the path they'd come, but the forest felt different, hostile. The trees twisted and groaned, branches reaching for them like skeletal hands, the very ground beneath them vibrated with an unsettling energy. They pushed through the underbrush, fear clawing at their heels. The mist followed, clinging like a foggy shroud, every breath thick with anxiety. Silence fell like a heavy blanket, the kind that made every rustle of leaves sound like thunder. Then, from behind, a low howl echoed through the trees, briefly scattering the mist like water. Mark's stomach plummeted, an instinctive realization washing over him. Faster! He gasped as adrenaline surged through his legs. They stumbled into another clearing, different this time. Light filtered through the thick canopy above, bathing the area in a surreal golden glow. Up ahead, a dilapidated cabin loomed, shadows creeping along its walls. Do we go in? Julie eyed the cabin hesitantly, fear warring with the sliver of hope glimmering in her eyes. We have to. Mark nodded, though every fiber of his being screamed to turn back. If they stayed out here, the whispers would catch up to them, and whatever waited in the gloom wouldn't be merciful. They approached cautiously. As they stepped onto the porch, the wood creaked under their weight and the door swung open, revealing a dark hallway beyond. The tension in the air was palpable, a tight coil that threatened to snap at any second. Maybe we can find something inside, he suggested, even as dread rose in his throat. With one last look behind them, they crossed the threshold and plunged into uncertainty. Inside, the air was thick and stale, an oppressive silence wrapping around them. On the walls hung old photographs, loved ones staring down with hollow eyes, watching, waiting. What have we stumbled into? Julie whispered, dread coiling tight in her chest. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the back of the cabin, sending a shockwave of terror down their spines. Something was inside with them. Julie's face was pale, fear spilling into her voice. Then the floorboards groaned once more, but this time it was coupled with a low growl that reverberated through the space. Mark's heart raced, each beat drowning out the whispers still pressing in from the outside. Whatever it is, we'll face it together, he said, though he felt more like a child than a protector. And then the unmistakable sound of breathing filled the darkness behind them, a rasping inhale that promised danger. What terrible fate awaited them in the shadows? Were they closer to revealing the truth, or had they unknowingly walked into a nightmare? The darkness swelled, filling the cabin with a palpable threat, the air thick like an impending storm. Mark and Julie stood frozen, hearts pounding in their chests, each breath steeped in fear. If we stay here, Mark started, but the words caught in his throat as another crash erupted from somewhere deep within the cabin, followed by screeching sounds that curdled the blood in his veins. It was a sound of something alive, something that twisted nature's harmony into chaos. Mark! Julie quivered, her eyes wide, tears glistening as she fumbled for reassurance. What do we do? Before he could gather his thoughts, the growling escalated, a low, guttural threat reverberating, wrapping around them like chains. Mark's mind raced. They couldn't just stand there. They had to find a way out or face the thing lurking in the shadows. Come on. He grabbed her hand, pulling her deeper into the cabin. Let us find a way out. The hallway stretched endlessly, walls lined with peeling paper, flaking away like memories lost to time. Abstract shapes danced in the low light, casting peculiar shadows that flickered with each anxious breath. As they moved stealthily forward, every floorboard creaked, each sound echoing like a warning. The weight of dread pressed down on them, yet Mark refused to show weakness. He squeezed Julie's hand tighter, needing to ground himself, needing to feel her warmth among the cold despair. "There has to be a back door," he whispered, scanning the dimly lit rooms as they passed. Old furniture lay scattered, each piece a remnant of a lifeful past, but now only dust and decay lingered in their emptiness. Suddenly, the growl changed, became more distinct, almost curious. A chilling recognition sank into Mark. The entity wasn't just hunting, it was toying with them. With a push of adrenaline-fueled terror, he pressed on, his legs pumping harder, urging Julie forward. They stumbled into a cramped kitchen, where a rusted knife lay abandoned on the counter, glinting faintly in the gloom. Mark picked it up, feeling the weight in his hand, a reassuring heft against the horror looming nearby. "What are we going to do?" Julie's voice trembled, breaking through Mark's focus. Panic flashed across her features, reflecting his own dread. "I don't know," he admitted, fear creeping in despite his bravado. "But we can't let it corner us." Another crash punctuated the thick silence. It was closer now. They turned and saw the shadows shift just beyond the doorway, encroaching like smoke. The thing in the darkness breathed heavily, an impatient predator. "Mark!" Julie gasped, her eyes darting. "What if it's playing with us?" He felt a weight in his chest, the dark inference of her words. What if they were mere pawns in a game devised by some malevolent force? Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity filled with what-ifs. "We have to get out," he insisted. But as they moved back toward the hallway, the growl from behind suddenly cut off, replaced by an eerie silence that made his skin crawl. "Did it go?" Julie breathed, wide-eyed. "Keep moving," Mark urged, inching forward cautiously. They reached the end of the hallway and flung open a door, only to be met by a solid wall of abyss. No exit. Just an empty corner with crumbling boards. "Wait. What's over there?" Julie pointed to another door, partially ajar, light spilling from within like a beacon, heartbeat hammering. They rushed toward it. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room cluttered with dust-covered relics of a forgotten era. Old books, cracked mirrors, and most chilling of all, a faintly glowing object on a workbench in the corner. "What is that?" Julie asked, drawn toward it, curiosity mingling with fear. I don't know," Mark whispered, but the light seemed to pulse, calling to him with a siren song. His fingers tingled with the instinct to reach out, but just as he stepped closer, the growl returned, more ferocious. They turned as the shadows converged with a terrible speed, now revealing eyes glowing like coals of hellfire. For one split second, their hearts sank in pure terror as they understood. They weren't just inside a cabin, they were inside the maw of something ancient, something craving. "Mark, run!" Julie screamed, and it felt like a thunderclap, jolting him into action. They sprinted, but the presence followed, relentless and unstoppable. As the light behind them dimmed and shadows stretched to swallow them whole, they barreled through the door. But in the chaos, another crash reverberated from just beyond reach, a slamming sound, the unmistakable sound of escape slamming shut. What awaited them? Did they truly escape the nightmare, or had they just opened another door into something even darker? The air in the small room felt electric with dread, like the moments before a storm breaks. Mark and Julie stood frozen, their breaths shallow and panicked. As the growling resumed, now layered with a sinister undercurrent, they could feel the walls closing in around them. "Mark!" Julie gasped, a thread of hysteria mixed with hope in her voice. "We have to find a way out. There has to be another door." He turned, adrenaline flooding his veins, desperate for an escape. The shadows flickered ominously, teasing them with glimpses of movement just beyond the corners of their vision. Eyes, countless eyes, watching. Waiting. "Okay, we need to split up," he said, the words tumbling out before he had time to second-guess himself. "I'll check this side, you take the other." "No. Don't leave me," she pleaded, terror gripping her as she clutched the blade Mark had left on the counter. He hated the idea of leaving her alone, but there was no time. The growling was deafening now, a monstrous sound echoing from the depths of the shadows, every syllable a promise of death. "Just call if you find something," he called over his shoulder, forcing his legs to move away from her while his heart begged to stay. Mark dashed into the darkness, searching frantically for any sign of an exit. He felt the weight of the cabin pulling him back, the air pressed against him like a heavy fog. Every crumbling wall and broken beam felt like a hidden threat that he stumbled into a room cluttered with old furniture, a thick layer of dust coating each surface. A wooden trunk caught his eye, its lock rusted and bulging with age. Could it hold something useful? He rushed over, yanking it open, praying for a weapon, a survival tool, anything. Inside, he found old photographs, faded and cracked at the edges. Faces staring back at him. A family? Friends? They looked happy, blissfully unaware of the horror that now lingered in the air. He shuddered and tossed the photos aside, mind racing back to Julie. Suddenly, a rush of cold wind swept through the room, fluttering papers as if the cabin itself was exhaling. The growl behind him escalated, a sound filled with frustration, hunger, and anticipation. Craning his neck, Mark saw a vague shadow dart by just outside the doorway. "Julie!" he shouted, panic clawing at his throat. "Where are you?" Silence responded, thick and suffocating that he stepped back into the hallway, now pleading for any sign of her. As he moved, the floor creaked, echoing like a scream through the gloom. He halted abruptly as he spotted her shadow in the beam of light radiating from the other room. "Mark!" Julie called, her voice shaky but determined. "I found something." He rushed toward her, the shadows shivering in his wake. As he reached her side, she held up an ancient-looking book, its cover worn but gleaming with the same unsettling light they had seen on the workbench. "I think it's a journal," she said, her hands trembling but excitement or fear capturing her voice. "Maybe it tells us what this place is, what that thing is." Mark's heart raced with a mix of dread and curiosity. "What did you find?" "I don't know yet. But look, there are names here and dates. It goes back centuries." Just then, the growl erupted into a ferocious roar, louder than anything they had heard before, echoing off the walls and shaking the very foundation of the cabin. Shadows pooled at the edges, their form growing sharper and more menacing. "Whatever is in that journal could be our only hope," Julie urged, and despite the fear clawing at his insides, Mark felt a flicker of resolve. As she opened the journal, hurriedly flipping through its pages, the words seemed to dance and twist in the dim light. That's when Mark noticed that the pages were stained, each line dripping with something dark and viscous. "Julie, listen," he said sharply, cutting into her focus as the growling intensified. "We need to get out of here now." Julie's eyes locked onto his, glistening with dread but still determined. "No. If we can find out what we're dealing with, we might be able to fight back." But as she flipped to the end of the journal, the final page revealed a drawing, a terrifying creature with eyes full of hunger and malice, an image so vivid it pulsed in the dim room. Suddenly, from the depths of the cabin, another roar resonated, now sounding almost enraged, as if it had been roused from a deep slumber and was hungry for vengeance. Hard in his throat, Mark looked to Julie, the journal forgotten in her hands. "We have to go. Now. It's coming." Just as they turned to make their escape, the door slammed shut, pinning them inside with the creature's wrath. And as the shadows exploded into the light, bursting with horrific intent, a sickening realization washed over them. They weren't being hunted, they were being herded towards something far worse than either of them could imagine. In that moment, one piercing question loomed heavy in the air: what did that thing want with them, and were they already too late to escape its grasp? The cacophony of roaring shadows engulfed the cabin, a monstrous symphony that throbbed in Mark's ears and sent prickles of fear down his spine. Time stretched. The adrenaline coursing through him felt electric, igniting every nerve ending, heightening his senses. Behind him, Julie clutched the journal like a lifeline. The wood under his palms was damp with sweat as he pressed forward, heart thrumming with each beat. "Julie, we need to find a way out," he shouted, his voice breaking slightly. The growling crescendoed, reverberating through the walls, enveloping them. "Yes, but look!" Her voice came out in a rush, barely perceptible over the din as she pointed at a faded inscription on the page she'd opened. "These dates, they're all related to disappearances. Families, they vanished in these woods." Anguish twisted Mark's stomach into knots. "That can't mean anything good. We don't have time for this." But he couldn't tear his eyes away, not when the realization hit each name was a tether to a life once lived, now possibly snuffed out by whatever dark entity prowled this forsaken place. Before Mark could think, the door creaked ominously, a heavy push against the frame. The very structure of the cabin felt alive, groaning under the weight of something terrible beyond the threshold. "Wait," she begged, her voice trembling. "If we can learn what this is, we might stop it from feeding on more." A deafening crash interrupted her, and splintering wood flew into the room. The shadows merged and contorted, forming grotesque shapes before fully unveiling themselves, a hulking figure, dripping with darkness, weighed down by malevolence. Mark's breath hitched. Heart slamming against his chest, he stumbled back, eyes wide and frantic. What is that thing? It's here for us!" Julie screamed, the book slipping from her fingers, landing with a soft thud that felt like a death knell in the charged air. The creature loomed larger, its eyes glowing, reflecting raw hunger, no longer a mere hunting beast, but something almost human in its desperation. "Look!" Mark shouted, moving away from the advancing horror. "We have to move." They dashed to the other side of the room, the growl replaced by a deep, rumbling growl followed by a chilling silence. And in that silence came the realization, they were not alone. The shadows unfurled slowly, revealing more than just the behemoth in front of them. 100 glinting eyes now stared from the gloom, watching, waiting for the command to strike. That a primal terror seized Mark as he gripped Julie's arm, pulling her toward the only other door he could see, a rickety frame at the back of the room. "This way!" he yelled, propelling them both forward, heart racing against the heartbeat of darkness surrounding them. The growl re-emerged, but now it morphed into a rasping chuckle, as if the creature enjoyed the game. They reached the door just as the thing lunged toward them, jaws open wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth gleaming with drool. With a swift shove, Mark forced the door open. Julie tumbled through, and he followed close behind, slamming the door shut just as the creature's snarl echoed against its barrier. For a split second, silence reigned. "It's locked!" Julie cried out as she fumbled with the latch, hands trembling. They stood against the door, breathless, listening to the thud of their heartbeats and the echoes of the creature's fitful growling on the other side. "Look at the journal." Mark glanced back into the darkness of the room they had left, his mind racing with possibilities. It said something about an altar, a sacrifice. Maybe it has to do with stopping that thing. Panic surged through her, eyes wide. "A sacrifice? What, Julie?" he interrupted, his jaw tightening. "Whatever it is, it needs us to know that we have to face this. We're deeper in than we thought." The growls intensified, now a warning, a promise of what was to come. They had little time. They could feel the creature pressing against the door, its impatience palpable. Mark swallowed hard, choking on dread. "We need to find that altar. If we don't confront it, we're as good as dead." As they stepped away from the door, Mark's mind raced. What sacrifices had been made here? What darkness thrived in the origins of this place? With the growling now replaced by thuds against the barrier, they both hesitated for a moment, fear clawing at them. They stepped into the dark hallway, stepping deeper into the unknown, but what lay ahead would reveal not just the monster that hunted them, but secrets that could shatter their understanding of life, death, and everything in between. And as the door creaked open, they had one question: were they brave enough to uncover the truth, or would it consume them whole? The echo of shadowy growls followed Mark and Julie as they navigated through the dimly lit corridor. Every step sent vibrations through the floorboards, a painful reminder of what lurked behind. Heartbeats synced in terror, they pressed on, moving deeper into the darkness. What if we're trapped? Julie whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Each syllable trembled with dread, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence wrapping around them. We'll find a way out, Mark said, his voice steadier than he felt, pushing forward with every ounce of determination. There has to be something we can use. The journal mentioned an altar, maybe it can help us. The hallway opened into a wider space, walls lined with remnants of faded tapestries, hanging like ghosts from a long-lost time. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, marking the years of neglect. Scattered throughout the room were old wooden carving statues of figures twisted in torment, frozen in their last moments of despair. Julie stepped cautiously, a sense of something inevitability weighing upon them. Do you think this is it? Their eyes fell upon a stone slab at the center, worn and stained with remnants of sacrifices long past. Its surface gleamed darkly, almost sentient. The air thickened with tension, a forced stillness surrounding them. Is this what we need? She reached out a trembling hand, the gesture almost involuntary. I don't know, he cautioned. But we have to try. Without thinking, he stepped forward, placing a palm against the cool stone. Instantly, images flooded his mind, the faces of those lost, screams echoing in pain, a desperate need to break free from their bondage. The book's pages flashing in his mind, words blurring into warnings. Julie, it's feeding off fear, he said, realization crashing over him. Then we can't let it have any. Mark's stomach nodded. How could they fight against something feeding on their terror? He turned to her, the weight of despair hanging over them. We need to confront it. The journal spoke of facing the darkness to be free. Behind them, the door creaked alarmingly, the sound of something large crashing against it. The creature was persistent, its growls morphing into a frustrated rage. Hurry! He urged. Every minute felt like a countdown to death. With a steely edge forming in her voice, Julie offered, what if we call it out? We challenge it. Make it reveal itself. All right. Together. Mark replied, trying to siphon courage from her unwavering spirit even as fear gnawed at his insides. On the count of 3. They both inhaled deeply, both bracing for an unseen storm. 1, 2, 3. Show yourself. They yelled in unison. The name of the creature escaped their lips, a name written in the journal, reveal to us your darkness. The air trembled. Shadows splintered, twisting into a vortex, dark tendrils reaching towards them. The room throbbed with an otherworldly energy as the growl escalated, punctuated by the tearing of wood and metal behind them. The door would not hold for long. Mark grasped Julie's hand, their bond a lifeline in the chaos. Stay close. He shouted, bracing himself. As the creature finally emerged, an amalgam of fear and horror, it towered before them, eyes glowing with a feral light, jagged teeth dripping with rage. You have come to offer yourselves, the voice rumbled like thunder, dark and twisted, echoing around the chamber, sending tremors through the ground beneath them. The air felt alive with its malevolence. No! Mark shouted, shaking his head. We're here to confront you. We won't be prey to your darkness. Julie squeezed his hand tighter, finding strength in the resolve that surged between them. There was undeniable power in unyielding defiance against the abyss that threatened to consume them. The creature paused, confusion momentarily flickering in its glimmering eyes. Then you have chosen the path of sacrifice. No. Mark recoiled, raising the journal as if it were a shield. We won't sacrifice ourselves. We will break this cycle, end your reign. The shadows were closing in, but with every proclamation of resilience, light flickered in the chamber, illuminating their determination. The deeper they pushed, the more the dark entity writhed, trapped between worlds. Fulfill your hunger elsewhere. Julie blurted out suddenly. We won't let you hold us captive. A sudden rush of wind spiraled around them, and within that storm came the echoes of the lost souls bound to this creature. Mark's heart raced as he recalled the journal, vividly images of the altar flash in his mind. Come on. If we can harness their power, it might weaken the creature. We need their help. He stepped back, eyes flicking toward the shadows, summoning the lingering souls trapped in their cries. Your pain will end. Join us in breaking the cycle. Flickers of light began to emerge from the surrounding darkness, swirling toward them like moths drawn to flame. The figures, though ghost-like and translucent, bore the weight of unfulfilled desires and buried desperation, rising up in response. A roar from the creature thundered through the air, rattling the structure. It recoiled, anger igniting its wicked form. You think to use them against me? Yes. Together. Julie called into the rising storm. We will not be your sacrifice. As more figures joined their plea, the energy transformed, igniting bright bursts of light against the dark entity. Mark could feel it. What once choked them was now feeding off his own resolve, their strength merging into one. Now! He screamed as the encroaching shadows began to retreat under the tempest of furious lights. Break free! Humanize your souls! With a roar, the dark creature howled in fury, the lights shrieking, ramping up in ferocity, dispelling the shadows on its grotesque form. In one sweeping gesture, all at once the darkness shattered, cleaved apart by the resolve they summoned through unity. Now! Mark exclaimed, his voice cutting through the chaos. We can escape. And as the creature was consumed by its own despair, Mark and Julie burst through the light, emerging into the cool night air. Gasping, they staggered into the clearing, limbs trembling, hearts still racing from the terror they had faced. They turned, eyes drifting back to the cabin, a silhouette shrouded in darkness now flickering between realms, releasing the echoes of those lost that they'd fought back the dark and freed those tormented souls. But the scars of the night lingered. They had confronted a horror that threatened who they were. Let us get out of here, Mark said softly, his voice weary yet resolute, wrapping an arm around Julie's shoulders. Yeah, she sighed deeply, casting one last glance at the cabin, hope igniting within her. We broke that cycle now, we'll live to see tomorrow. Hand in hand, they walked away from Hollow Creek, leaving behind the haunting echoes of the night, feeling the first glimmers of dawn peeking over the horizon. The road stretched out ahead, a winding promise that although darkness existed, strength lay within their unity, ready to face whatever awaited. And beneath the fading stars, they knew, the shadows would never truly silence them. If you're the type of person who loves a good story, you need to subscribe now and don't risk missing out on future tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to fuel the algorithm so more incredible stories can be shared. Flood the comments section below with your thoughts about this ending. What do you think happened to Hollow Creek? And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this journey with us. Your support makes all the difference in bringing you more thrilling adventures.